What would you do if you heard the desperate cries of animals fighting for their lives beneath a frozen lake? Would you risk your own safety to save them? For three brothers in rural Montana, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was a life-or-death decision they faced on a bitterly cold January morning in 2019. As the temperature plummeted to negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit, the brothers discovered that several newborn calves from their family farm had fallen through the ice of a nearby pond. What happened next would test their courage, endurance, and the unbreakable bond that only brothers share. Hey folks, thanks for clicking on today's video. If you're enjoying this true story of survival and heroism, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Are you somewhere cold enough to relate to this incredible story? Let me know, and let's continue with this remarkable tale of determination. The morning of January 12, 2019, began like any other winter day for the Sullivan brothers, Matt, 32, Luke, 28, and Jake, 24. Born and raised on their family's cattle ranch near Browning, Montana, these third-generation ranchers were accustomed to the harsh winter conditions of the northern plains. The Sullivan Ranch, established by their grandfather in 1952, had weathered countless winter storms, but nothing could have prepared the brothers for the challenge they would face that day. As the first light of dawn broke across the snow-covered landscape, Luke Sullivan headed out to check on their herd of Black Angus cattle. January was calving season, and with the brutal cold snap that had descended upon Montana that week, the newborn calves required constant monitoring. The air was so frigid that each breath formed a thick cloud of vapor, and the snow crunched loudly underfoot as Luke made his way toward the eastern pasture. The Sullivan Ranch stretched across 3,800 acres of Montana countryside, bordered on one side by a series of spring-fed ponds that remained partially unfrozen even in the coldest winters due to their constant water flow. These ponds, usually a blessing for watering livestock during summer droughts, had become a deadly hazard as temperatures dropped to record lows. As Luke approached the largest pond, something caught his attention: dark shapes moving against the white landscape and faint sounds that stood out from the howling wind. His heart sank as he realized what was happening. Several calves, no more than a few days old, had wandered onto the ice and fallen through in multiple places. Their terrified mothers paced helplessly at the edge of the pond, their distressed bellows carrying across the frozen landscape. "Matt! Jake!" Luke's voice cracked as he shouted into his radio, the urgency evident in his tone. "Get to the east pond now! We've got calves in the water!" Within minutes, Matt's truck appeared. On the horizon, fishtailing slightly on the icy ranch road as he raced toward the pond, with Jake following close behind on the ranch's utility vehicle. As they arrived, the gravity of the situation became clear. 5 calves were trapped in the freezing water, their small black heads barely visible above the surface as they struggled to stay afloat among jagged chunks of ice. The temperature gauge on Matt's truck read 35 degrees, and meteorologists had been warning of an approaching blizzard set to hit the area by noon. The brothers knew they were racing against 2 deadly timelines: the rapidly dropping body temperatures of the calves and the approaching storm that could trap them all in whiteout conditions. "We don't have much time," Matt said, his breath visible in the frigid air as he grabbed shovels and rope from his truck. "Once hypothermia sets in, we'll lose them for sure." Jake, the youngest brother, who had recently returned to the ranch after completing his degree in veterinary science, quickly assessed the situation. "Their body temperatures are already dangerously low. If we don't get them out in the next 30 minutes, they won't make it." The brothers exchanged determined looks. Without a word, they understood what needed to be done. They would have to break through the ice, wade into the freezing water, and somehow lift the struggling calves, each weighing around 85 pounds, back onto solid ground. And they would have to do it quickly, before the blizzard trapped them all in its frozen grip. Little did they know this rescue attempt would soon turn into a desperate fight for survival, not just for the calves, but for the Sullivan brothers themselves. The piercing wind cut through the brothers' heavy winter gear as they frantically formulated a rescue plan. Each minute that passed was precious time lost for the trapped calves, whose cries were growing noticeably weaker in the frigid water. "We need to create a channel through the ice," Matt shouted over the howling wind, pointing to the closest calf about 15 feet from the shore. "Jake, grab those pickaxes from my truck. Luke, get the tow straps and blankets." The brothers moved with practiced efficiency, a testament to years of working together through countless ranch emergencies. Matt, the oldest, had naturally assumed the leadership role after their father's unexpected passing 3 years earlier. His weathered face, prematurely lined from years of working outdoors, remained focused as he calculated their approach. Luke, the middle brother, known for his physical strength, began smashing at the ice with a pickaxe, creating a narrow channel toward the first calf. The ice was nearly 8 inches thick in places, requiring tremendous force to break through. Each swing sent shards of ice flying into the air, some cutting small lacerations on Luke's exposed face, but he continued without pause. Jake, who had the most medical knowledge, prepared the emergency supplies they would need once the calves were retrieved. He laid out wool blankets on the back of the utility vehicle and started the portable heater they used during calving season. His veterinary training told him that the calves would need immediate warming to have any chance of survival after extended exposure to the near-freezing water. The temperature continued to drop as dark storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Weather alerts buzzed on their phones, warning of an approaching blizzard with expected winds of 50 miles per hour and another foot of snow. They had perhaps an hour before conditions would become too dangerous, even for the rescuers. "The ice is too thick," Luke shouted, his arms already burning from the exertion. "This is taking too long." Matt surveyed their progress. The channel they were creating was only about 5 feet long, with at least 10 more feet to reach the first calf. At this rate, they wouldn't reach even one calf before the storm hit. "We need the chainsaw," Matt decided, racing back to his truck. He returned moments later with their heavy-duty ranching chainsaw, typically used for clearing fallen trees after storms. It was a desperate measure, but time was running out. The chainsaw roared to life, its angry mechanical growl startling the mother cows that continued to pace anxiously at the pond's edge. With steady hands, Matt began cutting through the ice, creating a jagged channel toward the closest calf. The work was dangerous. One slip could send him into the freezing water or cause a serious injury, but the alternative was watching the calves perish. As Matt worked with the chainsaw, Jake prepared himself for what would come next. Someone would need to enter the water to guide the calves back through the channel to safety. With the water temperature just above freezing, immersion could lead to hypothermia within minutes. "I'll go in," Jake announced, already removing his heavy outer coat and replacing it with the waterproof waders they used for irrigation work. "I'm the lightest, and I know how to handle the calves without causing more stress." Luke shook his head. "Those waders won't be enough in this temperature. The water will be life-threatening in minutes." "We don't have a choice," Jake replied, his face set with determination. "Hand me the rope. I'll tie it around my waist. If anything happens, pull me out." The chainsaw fell silent as Matt finished cutting the channel. The opening in the ice stretched like a jagged wound across the frozen surface, leading to the first struggling calf. Steam rose from the exposed water, creating an eerie fog just above the surface. The nearest calf's movements had become sluggish, its eyes wide with terror as it struggled to keep its nostrils above water. The brothers could see its small body trembling violently from the cold. Sign that hypothermia was already setting in. "We're coming, little one," Jake whispered, securing the rope around his waist and handing the end to his brothers. "Don't give up now." With a deep breath, Jake stepped toward the channel's edge, prepared to enter the freezing water. The next few minutes would determine whether their desperate rescue attempt would end in triumph or tragedy. The moment Jake's body made contact with the freezing water, a gasp escaped his lips, even through the waders. The cold attacked with savage intensity, sending shockwaves of pain throughout his body. "Jesus Christ," he hissed through clenched teeth. "It's colder than I thought." Matt and Luke maintained a firm grip on the safety rope as Jake pushed forward through the narrow channel they had created in the ice. The water reached just above his waist, the current tugging gently but persistently against his legs. Each step required immense effort, both to maintain balance on the slippery pond bottom and to fight through the pain of the cold. "Can you still feel your legs?" Matt called out. Concern etched across his face as he watched his younger brother navigate the treacherous waters. "Barely," Jake replied, his voice already showing signs of the cold's effect. "But I'm almost to the first calf. If you're still with us on this incredible true story of brotherhood and courage, hit that subscribe button right now. We've got amazing stories like this every week. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you somewhere that gets this cold? Have you ever experienced weather this extreme? Drop a comment below, and let's keep this conversation going. The closest calf was now just a few feet away from Jake. its dark eyes reflecting fear and exhaustion, locked onto the approaching human figure. The young animal's struggles had weakened substantially in the past few minutes, a concerning sign. Around the pond, the mother. Cows continued their distressed pacing, their mournful bellows creating a heartbreaking soundtrack to the rescue attempt. Jake reached the first calf, a small heifer with a white star marking on her forehead. Her small body trembled violently as hypothermia tightened its grip. Jake could see her struggling to keep her head above water, her movements becoming increasingly uncoordinated. "I've got her," Jake called back to his brothers as he carefully positioned himself behind the calf. "She's still breathing, but she's fading fast." Using the techniques he had learned in veterinary school, Jake carefully supported the calf's body, keeping its head above water while beginning to guide it toward the channel. The animal was too weak to resist, allowing Jake to slowly maneuver it toward safety. "That's it, little one," he murmured encouragingly. "Just a little farther." As Jake guided the calf through the channel, Luke knelt at the edge, ready to pull the animal onto solid ground. The wind had intensified, driving needle-sharp snowflakes horizontally across the landscape, the leading edge of the approaching blizzard. "The storm's picking up," Matt warned, glancing at the darkening sky. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before visibility drops to 0. With careful coordination, Jake positioned the calf where Luke could reach its front legs. With a powerful heave, Luke pulled the waterlogged animal onto the ice. The calf collapsed immediately too, exhausted and cold to stand. "Get her to the heated trailer," Matt instructed. "I'll take over here. Jake, you need to get out and warm up." But Jake had already turned back toward the pond, where 4 more calves remained trapped and struggling. "There's no time," he shouted back. "I'm already wet and my body is acclimated. I can reach the next one faster than you can get geared up." Before his brothers could protest, Jake was pushing deeper into the pond, moving toward the next calf about 10 feet away. This one, a small black bull calf, was struggling more vigorously than the first, making the rescue potentially more dangerous. The calf's mother paced anxiously at the pond's edge, her distress growing as Jake approached her baby. Luke quickly wrapped the rescued calf in wool blankets and carried it to the utility vehicle, where the portable heater was running at full blast. The animal's body was dangerously cold, its normal temperature of 102 degrees likely, dropped to dangerous levels. Meanwhile, Jake had reached the second calf. His movements were noticeably slower now, the prolonged exposure to the freezing water taking its toll. His hands, protected only by thin, waterproof gloves, had lost almost all feeling. "Jake, your lips are turning blue," Matt called out, the concern in his voice turning to alarm. "You need to get out after this one." But Jake wasn't listening. His entire focus was on the struggling calf before him, its life hanging in the balance. As he reached for the animal, a disturbing crack echoed across the pond, the ice shifting beneath the pressure of the rescue efforts and the strengthening wind. Time was running out, and not just for the calves. The sky darkened ominously as the storm front advanced across the Montana landscape. What had been scattered snowflakes minutes ago was quickly intensifying into blinding sheets of white. The temperature, already dangerously low, plummeted further as the barometric pressure dropped. Weather instruments at the Sullivan Ranch House, a mile away, would later record a 13-degree temperature drop in just 20 minutes as the blizzard engulfed the property. Matt kept his eyes fixed on Jake, who was now struggling to maneuver the second calf through the broken channel. The young bull calf was more resistant than the first, its survival instincts triggering a fight response that made the rescue attempt more challenging. Jake's movements had become increasingly sluggish, his coordination visibly affected by the prolonged exposure to the freezing water. "Jake!" Matt shouted over the rising wind. "Stop fighting with it. Let me pull him from here." Jake nodded weakly, changing tactics to guide the frightened calf toward the edge, where Matt waited with an improvised lasso. With expert precision born from years of ranching experience, Matt looped the rope around the calf's chest and shoulders, creating a harness that would distribute the pulling force without injuring the animal. "Pull now," Jake called, his voice noticeably weaker. Matt and Luke, who had returned from securing the first calf in the heated trailer, heaved in unison. The calf slid onto the ice surface, its wet black coat immediately beginning to stiffen in the frigid air. Unlike the first calf, this one immediately attempted to stand, a promising sign that its core temperature hadn't dropped too drastically. "Get him to the trailer," Matt ordered Luke, then turned back to his younger brother, still in the water. "Jake, that's enough. You need to get out now." Jake's face had taken on a frightening pallor, his lips a disturbing shade of blue. Even from the shore, Matt could see that his brother's body was shaking uncontrollably, the involuntary muscle contractions of someone in the early stages of hypothermia. "3 more, Jake responded, his words slightly slurred. "Can't leave them." "Damn it, Jake. You're no good to these calves if you freeze to death," Matt shouted, real fear creeping into his voice. "Get out now, that's an order." The authority in Matt's voice, reminiscent of their father's tone when situations became dangerous, finally seemed to penetrate Jake's cold-induced stubbornness. With painfully slow movements, he began making his way back toward the shore, each step clearly requiring immense effort. As Luke rushed the second calf to safety, Matt lay flat on the ice, at the channel's edge, extending a shepherd's crook toward his brother. Jake reached for it with numbed hands, barely able to close his fingers around the handle. With a powerful pull, Matt dragged his brother toward solid ice, then helped him to his feet. Jake collapsed almost immediately, his legs too numb to support his weight. His entire body convulsed with violent shivering, a natural response as his core temperature continued to fall dangerously low. "Can't feel anything?" Jake managed through chattering teeth. "The calves." "Luke will get you to the trailer," Matt said firmly, already removing his own heavy winter coat and wrapping it around his brother's shoulders. "I'll handle the rest." The blizzard was now upon them in full force, reducing visibility to less than 50 feet. The howling wind carried snow and ice particles that stung any exposed skin like tiny needles. The 3 remaining calves were becoming harder to see through the whitening landscape, their dark bodies appearing as mere shadows against the churning water. As Luke half-carried Jake toward the utility vehicle, Matt made a rapid assessment of their deteriorating situation. The storm had arrived faster and with greater intensity than forecasted. Radio reports warned that rescue services were already overwhelmed with emergency calls across the county. They were on their own. Making a split-second decision, Matt began removing his outer layers of clothing. He knew the risks of entering the freezing water, especially with a blizzard raging around them, but he couldn't bear the thought of abandoning the remaining calves to a slow, terrifying death. "Matt, don't you dare!" Luke called out, having settled Jake in the heated vehicle, and noticed his older brother's intentions. But Matt had already secured the safety rope around his waist and was using the chainsaw to widen the channel in the ice. The 3 remaining calves were visibly weakening, their struggles becoming more sporadic and feeble. "Get Jake warm," Matt shouted back. "Then bring the truck closer with the headlights on. We're going to need all the light we can get." Without waiting for a response, Matt lowered himself into the freezing water, gasping as the cold enveloped his body. The situation had transformed from a challenging rescue into a desperate race against nature's deadliest elements. The biting cold attacked Matt's body with merciless intensity as he pushed through the churning water. Each movement felt like wading through concrete as the freezing temperature assaulted his muscles and nerves. Unlike Jake, who had entered the water with the protection of waders, Matt wore only his jeans and thermal underwear, offering minimal insulation against the life-threatening cold. "Just keep moving," he muttered to himself, focusing on the closest calf about 20 feet away. "Don't think about the cold, just keep moving." Medical experts later explained that Matt's survival in these conditions defied normal physiological expectations. In water hovering just above freezing, unconsciousness typically occurs within 15 minutes, with death following shortly after. What the experts couldn't measure was the extraordinary power of determination and adrenaline coursing through Matt's body as he fought to save both the trapped calves and, ultimately, his family's livelihood. The visibility continued to deteriorate as the blizzard intensified. Matt could barely make out the shore behind him, the swirling snow creating a disorienting white void that seemed to close in from all directions. The safety rope tethering him to land was his lifeline in more ways than one, not just preventing him from drifting into deeper water, but also providing his only reliable sense of direction in the whiteout conditions. As Matt neared the 3rd calf, he noticed its struggles had weakened significantly. The small animal's head occasionally dipped below the surface before weakly rising again, a sign that its strength was nearly exhausted. This calf was smaller than the others, likely only a day or 2 old, making its chances of survival even slimmer. "I've got you, little one," Matt said as he reached the calf, supporting its head above water. The animal's body felt frighteningly cold against his already numbed hands. Through the driving snow, Matt could see the headlights of the truck approaching the pond's edge. illuminating the rescue scene with twin beams of yellow light. Luke had positioned the vehicle to provide maximum visibility, while also creating a partial windbreak against the howling gale. "Pull it taut!" Matt shouted, signaling Luke to create tension on the safety rope. Using this as an anchor, Matt maneuvered the calf toward the ice channel, fighting against both the water's resistance and his own rapidly declining body. Temperature. Back in the heated utility vehicle, Jake was gradually regaining sensation in his extremities, though the process was agonizingly painful as blood returned to his frozen tissues. Through clouded windows, he watched his older brother battling the elements, consumed by both concern and a sense of failure for not being able to complete the rescue himself. "I need to help them," Jake mumbled, attempting to rise despite his body's protests. The ranch hand who had arrived with additional equipment gently but firmly pushed him back down. "You're in no condition, Jake. Your brothers have this under control." But under control was far from an accurate description of the situation unfolding at the pond. As Matt guided the third calf toward the edge, where Luke waited with the rescue harness, a powerful gust of wind swept across the open water, creating a small wave that momentarily submerged both Matt and the calf. When they resurfaced, Matt was gasping for breath, the sudden immersion of his head and face accelerating the cold's deadly effects on his body. "Matt," Luke shouted, seeing his brother's condition deteriorating rapidly. "Get out now. We'll come back for the others when the storm breaks." But Matt shook his head, water dripping from his now frozen hair. "No time," he managed through violently chattering teeth. "They won't last." With a final surge of effort, Matt pushed the third calf within Luke's reach. As Luke secured the animal and began pulling it to safety, Matt turned back toward the remaining two calves, now barely visible through the intensifying storm. The cold was becoming overwhelming, his body's warning systems beginning to shut down. Medical experts call it cold shock response. The initial gasping and hyperventilation gradually giving way to muscle weakness, confusion, and a dangerous sense of warmth that signals the body's failing thermoregulation. Matt was entering this dangerous phase. His movements became increasingly uncoordinated, and an insidious warmth began to spread through his core. A deceptive, lethal warmth that tempted him to stop fighting, to rest just for a moment. "No," he growled, recognizing the deadly trap his mind was setting. "Not today." Summoning reserves of willpower that seemed to transcend physical limitations, Matt pushed forward toward the fourth calf, each step a battle against his body's growing urge to surrender to the cold. The Sullivan brothers' greatest test was yet to come. The fourth calf was barely moving now, its small head just visible above the churning water. Unlike the others that had fallen through in relatively shallow areas, this calf had drifted toward deeper water, making the rescue exponentially more dangerous. Matt could no longer touch the pond bottom as he approached, forcing him to swim the final few yards through the paralyzing cold. Luke had secured the third calf in the heated trailer and returned to the pond's edge, watching with growing horror as his brother's swimming motions became increasingly erratic. Even from shore, he could see that Matt was losing coordination, his arms moving in the uneven, jerky patterns characteristic of advanced hypothermia. "Matt!" Luke shouted into the howling wind. "The rope's not long enough. Come back." The safety rope had indeed reached its limit, stretched taut between the shore and Matt's position. To reach the fourth calf, Matt would need to untether himself, a potentially fatal decision in the worsening blizzard conditions. For a moment, Matt hesitated, the part of his brain still capable of rational thought, recognizing the extreme danger. But the sight of the struggling calf, a cornerstone of their family's future herd, compelled him forward. With numbed fingers, he fumbled with the knot at his waist. "Don't you dare!" Luke roared, realizing his brother's intentions. "Matt! That's suicide!" But Matt had already released the rope, allowing it to slip away as he swam the remaining distance to the calf. Later, when recounting this moment to reporters, Luke would describe it as watching his brother choose the family legacy over his own safety. Free from the rope's restriction, Matt reached the fourth calf, a small heifer with distinctive white markings on her face, the offspring of one of their prize breeding cows. The animal was barely responsive, its eyes glazed with exhaustion and cold. "Stay with me," Matt urged, supporting the calf's head while looking around for a way back to shore. The blizzard had now reduced visibility to mere feet, the truck's headlights appearing as dim, distant glows through the whiteout conditions. Luke, realizing the gravity of the situation, rushed to the truck and returned with a coiled length of ranch rope. With the practiced skill of someone who had competed in roping events since childhood, he began swinging the lasso above, his head aiming for his brother approximately 30 feet away. The first throw fell short, the heavy rope affected by the powerful crosswinds. The second attempt drifted left of its target. By the third throw, Luke's hands were shaking from both cold and fear, but his determination remained unshaken. "Come on," he muttered, focusing entirely on his brother's increasingly still form in the water. "Come on!" The third throw sailed true, landing just beyond Matt's position. With the last of his coordination, Matt managed to grab the rope with one hand while still supporting the calf with the other. "Pull!" he shouted weakly, his voice barely audible above the storm. Luke began the difficult process of pulling both his brother and the calf toward shore, the added weight and water resistance requiring enormous strength. The ranch hand, who had arrived with additional equipment, joined the effort, adding his strength to Luke's as they slowly retrieved the rope. As Matt was drawn closer to shore, Luke could see that his brother's condition had deteriorated alarmingly. Matt's lips were blue, his skin ghostly white, and most concerning, the violent shivering had stopped, a sign that his body was no longer able to generate heat. "Stay with me, Matt," Luke urged as they finally pulled his brother and the calf onto the ice. "Don't you dare check out on me." Matt made no response, his eyes unfocused as the cold continued its assault on his core. Functions. Medical literature describes this stage of hypothermia as the point where victims become irrational, often removing clothing due to a sensation of burning heat, a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing that precedes terminal decline. True to this pattern, Matt began weakly clawing at his frozen shirt. "Hot," he mumbled. "Too hot." "No, brother," Luke said firmly, pinning Matt's arms and wrapping him in emergency thermal blankets from the rescue kit. "That's the hypothermia talking. You're freezing to death." As Luke and the ranch hand carried Matt toward the truck, the fourth calf lay trembling on the ice, too weak to stand but still alive. Through the driving snow, the fifth and final calf could just barely be seen, still trapped in the water. One brother saved, one barely hanging on, and one final life still at stake. The Sullivan family's ordeal was reaching its climax as the Montana blizzard raged unabated around them. The Sullivan Ranch, house transformed into an emergency medical center as the brothers fought their separate battles against hypothermia. In the living room, Matt lay wrapped in thermal blankets beside the roaring fireplace, his body temperature still dangerously low despite the heat surrounding him. Jake, having recovered enough to move around, had taken charge of monitoring his older brother's vital signs while they waited for emergency medical services to arrive through the blizzard. "His pulse is getting stronger," Jake announced, two fingers pressed against Matt's neck. "But his core temperature is still too low." Luke had just returned from securing the fourth rescued calf in the heated barn, his face a mask of exhaustion and concern. "The county emergency services called," he reported. "All roads are closed. The earliest they can get here is morning, and that's if the storm breaks." The implications hung heavily in the room. Without professional medical care, Matt's condition could deteriorate rapidly, potentially leading to cardiac arrhythmias or worse, as his body slowly rewarmed. And out on the pond, the fifth calf remained trapped, its chances of survival diminishing with each passing minute. "I have to go back," Luke said, already reaching for his still damp winter gear hanging by the door. "You can't," Jake protested. "The storm's gotten worse, and you can't do it alone. It's too dangerous." Luke paused, torn between his responsibility to his brother and their obligation to the animals that depended on them for survival. The Sullivan family had always lived by their father's creed: "We finish what we start, and we never abandon an animal in need." A weak voice broke the tense silence. "Take the tractor," Matt mumbled, his eyes still closed but his mind evidently clearer than it had been at the pond. "The front loader. Break more ice." Jake and Luke exchanged glances, immediately understanding what Matt was suggesting. Their John Deere utility tractor, equipped with a front-end loader, could potentially break through the remaining ice more efficiently than their manual efforts, creating a path to reach the final calf without requiring anyone to enter the water again. It might work, Jake acknowledged, his veterinary mind calculating the calf's remaining survival time, but the visibility— "I'll drive slow," Luke decided, his expression resolute, "and tie a guideline from the house to the pond so I can find my way back." What followed was a testament to human ingenuity in crisis. Using a combination of the tractor's front loader to break ice and a modified boat hook to reach the calf, Luke managed to create a channel to the final animal and drag it to safety without entering the water himself. The entire operation, conducted in near-zero visibility conditions with the temperature at 38 degrees Celsius including wind chill, took nearly 2 hours. By the time Luke returned to the ranch house, half frozen but triumphant, Matt's condition had stabilized enough for Jake to turn his attention to the rescued calves. All 5 were alive, though severely hypothermic and requiring intensive care. Throughout that long night, the Sullivan brothers worked in shifts, 2 always attending to the calves in the heated barn, while the 3rd monitored Matt's condition. They administered warm IV fluids to the animals, gently rubbed their limbs to restore circulation, and used their own body heat when necessary to keep the smallest calves warm. By dawn, the blizzard had finally begun to subside, leaving behind a transformed landscape buried under nearly 3 feet of fresh snow. The first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across the ranch as an emergency medical helicopter landed in the cleared area beside the house, summoned by the county dispatcher once weather conditions allowed flight. As paramedics rushed inside to attend to Matt, Luke stood in the doorway of the barn watching the medical team work. Beside him, Jake leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion etched into his young face. 5 out of 5, Jake said quietly. "All the calves are going to make it." Luke nodded, too tired for words but filled with the profound satisfaction that comes from facing nature's worst and emerging victorious. Their father would have been proud. 6 months later, the Sullivan brothers would be honored by the Montana Livestock Association for their extraordinary efforts during what meteorologists had declared the worst winter storm in the region in 30 years. The 5 rescued calves, now healthy and thriving, stood as living testaments to the brothers' courage and determination. But the real reward, as Matt would later tell a local reporter, wasn't the recognition or even the economic value of the saved animals. It was the knowledge that when tested to their absolute limits, the bonds of brotherhood and the Sullivan family's commitment to their way of life had proven unbreakable, even against the full fury of nature's wrath.